At his wife's funeral, a billionaire expects silence until two 5-year-old girls step forward and whisper a prayer meant only for her. What they say shatters everything he thought he knew about love, family, and the quiet kindness hidden behind closed doors. The chapel was built for echoes, but that morning it held none. Only silence, thick, deliberate, heavy enough to press against the chest. Rowan Ashford stood at the front, motionless, his hands folded, as if they belonged to someone else. His tailored black suit fit perfectly, as everything in his life always had. Executives filled the pews behind him, investors, friends of convenience, faces arranged into the correct shape of grief. At the center of the room rested the polished coffin. Evelyn Ashford, the woman who had once laughed too loudly at quiet dinners. The woman who smelled like rain and old books. The woman who had died without warning. Rowan's eyes remained fixed on her still face, not because he expected her to wake, but because looking away felt like betrayal. He had built an empire from logic and restraint. Yet now, with Evelyn gone, every achievement felt hollow, like applause in an empty room. A priest spoke gentle words Rowan barely heard. Condolences passed like rehearsed lines. Someone touched his shoulder. Rowan nodded appropriately, distantly. He did not cry. Not when the final prayer was read. Not when the coffin lid was sealed. Not when the organ music rose. Then from the back of the chapel something shifted. A quiet disturbance. Not loud enough to interrupt, just enough to feel wrong. Rowan glanced over his shoulder. Two small figures stood at the entrance. They were children. Two little girls, no older than 5, holding hands as if the world beyond that doorway might pull them apart. Their coats were worn but clean. Their shoes slightly mismatched. Dark hair framed faces too serious for their age. They did not look afraid. They looked certain. A ripple of confusion moved through the chapel. Someone leaned toward another, whispering. Rowan frowned, an unfamiliar sensation tightening in his chest. The girls stepped inside, and without hesitation, they began walking straight toward Evelyn's coffin. The contrast was impossible to ignore. Two children moving through a room dressed in grief and silk. The guests parted instinctively, unsure whether to stop them. A woman in pearls rose halfway from her seat, hesitated, then sat back down. A man near the aisle glanced toward security, but no one moved fast enough to interrupt what felt strangely intentional. The girls walked slowly, their steps small but steady. The one on the left, Ivy, kept her chin, lifted, eyes forward. Her grip was firm, protective. The one on the right, Nova, clutched Ivy's sleeve, glancing around with open curiosity, as if memorizing faces. Rowan watched them approach, his heart beginning to race for reasons he could not explain. They stopped in front of the coffin. The chapel fell completely still. Ivy released Nova's hand first. Then both girls knelt together on the cold marble floor. The sound was soft, but it echoed louder than any prayer spoken that day. Rowan took an unconscious step forward. Ivy folded her hands carefully, just as if someone had taught her how. Nova copied her a moment later, though her fingers fidgeted, impatient with stillness. Then Ivy spoke. Her voice was small, but it carried. "Dear Aunt Evelyn." Rowan froze. The air seemed to leave his lungs all at once. Ivy continued her words, slow and careful, as though she wanted to make sure each one arrived safely. "Thank you for the sandwiches, and the warm coats, and for sitting with us when it rained." Murmurs stirred among the guests. Nova sniffed and added softly, "And thank you for the stories. I liked the ones where the brave girls always found their way home." Rowan's vision blurred. Aunt Evelyn, his Evelyn, the woman he had loved for over a decade, standing in this room, now revealed as someone he had never fully known. Ivy bowed her head deeper. "We promise we'll remember you," she whispered, "and we'll be kind, like you taught us." Nova looked up at the coffin, eyes wide and earnest. Are you going to read stories to the angels now? That was when Rowan felt it. The first tear slid down his face, and he did not stop it. Rowan did not remember moving. One moment he was standing before the coffin. The next, he was on his knees, at the children's level. The marble floor was cold through his suit, but he barely noticed. All he could see were the two small faces turned toward him, open, unafraid, impossibly calm. Ivy studied him with quiet attention. "Are you Uncle Rowan?" she asked. Her tone held no accusation, only recognition. Rowan tried to answer. His throat closed instead. Nova tilted her head. "Aunt Evelyn said you had a big house," she said thoughtfully, "but a bigger heart. She said sometimes you just forgot where you put it." A shaky breath escaped him. Rowan nodded once. "Yes," he managed. I'm Rowan." Ivy reached out and placed her small hand over his. It was warm, steady. "She told us this might happen," Ivy said. "That if we ever came here, you might be sad. And that was okay." Nova leaned forward and without asking gently wiped a tear from his cheek with her sleeve. "Don't cry," she said softly. Aunt Evelyn didn't like it when people cried alone. Something inside Rowan broke, not loudly, not violently, but completely. He pulled both girls into his arms, careful, protective, as if they were made of glass. For the first time since Evelyn's death, he did not feel empty. He felt needed. The chapel watched in stunned silence as the powerful man everyone feared knelt on the floor, holding two small girls, as if they were the only solid things left in his world. When Rowan finally spoke again, his voice was low but certain. "You don't have to be alone," he said. Ivy looked up at him. "Neither do you." And in that moment, standing at the edge of unimaginable loss, Rowan Ashford's life quietly and forever changed. The chapel did not rush him. No one pulled Rowan away. No voice interrupted the fragile circle formed on the marble floor. The world seemed to understand that something older than protocol was unfolding. Rowan loosened his embrace just enough to look at the girls' faces. Up close, Ivy's eyes were steady, too steady for a 5-year-old. Nova's lashes were still wet, but her mouth curved with the faintest hopeful smile. Ivy spoke again, softer now. "Aunt Evelyn used to say this room was very quiet," she said. "She said quiet places tell the truth better." Rowan swallowed. "She never mentioned you," he whispered. "It wasn't an accusation, just wonder." Ivy nodded. "She said some kindness works better when it's private." Nova leaned closer to the coffin. "She didn't want people to clap for it," she added seriously. "She wanted people to feel warm instead." Those words settled into Rowan's chest like a key turning. Memories began rearranging themselves, Evelyn coming home late with dirt on her shoes, the faint smell of soup on her coat, the afternoons she claimed were errands. He had never asked. He had trusted the surface of things. Rowan rested his palm on the edge of the coffin. "How did she help you?" he asked gently. Ivy answered without hesitation. "She listened, even when we talked slow." Nova nodded enthusiastically. "And she never said we were too much." Something tightened behind Rowan's eyes. A woman in the front row quietly covered her mouth. A man cleared his throat and looked away. The room was no longer watching a funeral, it was witnessing a truth being born. Rowan rose slowly, then offered his hand. "Would you like to stand with me?" he asked. The girls looked at each other, then took his hands at the same time. 3 figures stood before the coffin. Rowan felt the weight of eyes on his back, but for the first time in his life he did not care. When the service ended, people moved uncertainly, unsure how to exit a moment that felt unfinished. Rowan leaned down again. "Do you have somewhere safe to go?" he asked. Ivy met his gaze. Aunt Evelyn said, "If anything happened, you would know what to do." Rowan exhaled long and steady. I think he said quietly, she was right. The walk from the chapel felt longer than the walk in. Rowan moved carefully, Ivy on his left, Nova on his right. Their hands were small, but their presence was grounding, real in a way nothing else had been that day. The doors opened. Cold air swept in. Cameras waited at a respectful distance, curiosity held back by something resembling reverence. Rowan guided the girls toward his car. Nova stopped suddenly. "Is it okay if we look?" she asked, pointing to the black limousine. Rowan smiled faintly. "You can look." Her eyes widened. "It's very shiny. It's just a car," he said. Ivy considered this. Aunt Evelyn said big things aren't always important. Rowan nodded. She was very wise. Inside the car, Nova pressed her nose to the window, watching the city slide by. Ivy sat upright, hands folded in her lap, as if determined to behave properly in a place she didn't yet trust. Rowan watched them quietly. He noticed how Ivy shifted closer whenever Nova leaned away, how Nova relaxed whenever Ivy's sleeve brushed her arm. These were children who had learned to protect each other. His phone vibrated. A call from his attorney. Rowan turned it face down. Not now. As the car passed through the iron gates of the Ashford estate, Nova whispered, "It's very big." "Yes," Rowan said. "But it doesn't have to feel big." The front door opened before they reached it. Sloane Ashford stood on the steps, her expression frozen somewhere between disbelief and concern. Rowan stopped. "These are Ivy and Nova," he said calmly. They were Evelyn's. Sloane's eyes dropped to the girls' faces. The question she had prepared dissolved. "They're coming inside," Rowan continued. "Tonight." Sloane hesitated, then stepped aside. "Of course," she said quietly. "It's cold out here." As they crossed the threshold, Ivy squeezed Rowan's hand. "Thank you," she said, "for what he asked, for not asking us to explain everything at once." Rowan felt something ease inside him. Sometimes the safest thing an adult could do was listen slowly. The mansion had never sounded so alive. Footsteps echoed softly. Lights clicked on one by one. Sloane moved ahead, efficient but gentle, directing staff away with a single look. "We'll keep it quiet," she said. "Just the basics." Rowan nodded. They entered a guest room overlooking the garden. Warm lamps, clean sheets, a window fogged with winter breath. Nova spun once in the middle of the rug. "It smells like soap," she announced. Ivy smiled, a small, relieved smile. Sloane returned with 2 mugs of warm milk and placed them on the nightstand. She knelt to Nova's level. "If you need anything," she said softly, "you can ask." Nova considered her. "Even if it's silly, especially then." Sloane stood and met Rowan's eyes. Something passed between them, understanding and restraint. "I'll be nearby," she said. Then she left. Rowan helped Ivy straighten the blankets. Nova climbed onto the bed, then froze. "Are we in trouble?" she asked. Rowan sat beside her. "No," he said immediately. "You are safe." Ivy studied his face. "For how long?" Rowan answered honestly. "For as long as you need." Nova yawned, tension finally loosening its grip. "Can you stay?" she asked. Rowan hesitated, then lay his coat over the chair and sat back down. "Yes." The girls settled under the blankets. Ivy turned her head slightly. "Aunt Evelyn said sometimes families start quietly." Rowan looked at them, 2 small lives Evelyn had trusted him with. Outside, the house stood tall and silent. Inside, something fragile and extraordinary took root. And Rowan Ashford, for the first time in years, did not feel alone in the dark. Morning arrived quietly, as if the house itself were unsure whether it was allowed to wake up. Rowan stood in the doorway watching Ivy and Nova sleep. They lay curled toward each other, breathing in sync, the blankets rising and falling like a single promise. The sight struck him with an unfamiliar ache, tender, steady, real. He stepped away before the floorboards could betray him. In the kitchen, Sloane moved with deliberate calm, setting out bowls and fruit. No silver trays, no ceremony. "They're still asleep," Rowan said. "That's okay," Sloane replied. "So is the house." They ate in silence until footsteps padded down the hall. Nova appeared first, hair wild, eyes curious. Ivy followed, smoothing her sweater as if preparing for inspection. "Good morning," Rowan said. Nova smiled. "It smells friendly." Sloane hid a smile. At the table, Ivy waited until everyone was seated before touching her spoon. Nova watched, then copied her, serious in her effort to do things right. Rowan noticed everything. "How did Aunt Evelyn come to find you?" he asked gently. Ivy thought for a moment. "She didn't find us. She noticed us." Nova nodded. "She said people don't get lost. They get overlooked." Rowan set his cup down carefully. Ivy continued. "She came back every week, even when it rained, and when she couldn't." Nova added she left notes. Rowan's chest tightened. After breakfast, Ivy wandered toward the window overlooking the garden. "She said you had trees that listened." "They do," Rowan said. "If you're patient." Nova tugged his sleeve. "Are we staying?" Rowan knelt. "For now." Ivy accepted this with a nod. Nova leaned into him without asking. From the hallway, a staff member hesitated, unsure how to move around the children. Rowan caught the look and shook his head. "No adjustments needed. Let the house learn." As the girls stepped into the sunlight, Rowan felt it, a quiet shift. Not ownership, not obligation. Presence. And presence, he realized, was something he could give without explaining anything at all. Rowan waited until the afternoon light softened before opening the door. Evelyn's study had always been off limits, not forbidden, just private. He had respected that boundary without questioning it. Now, with Ivy and Nova drawing quietly at the dining table under Sloane's watch, the house felt ready. The room smelled faintly of lavender and paper. Shelves lined the walls, filled with books worn at the edges. A small lamp glowed beside the desk. Rowan ran his fingers along the wood, stopping when he felt something uneven. A leather-bound notebook lay half-hidden beneath a stack of letters. He opened it. The first page was a story. Once upon a time, there were two brave girls who believed the world could be kind if you listened closely enough. Rowan sank into the chair. The margins were filled with notes. Drawings of stars, little hearts, names written carefully. Ivy likes queens who choose mercy. Nova laughs at dragons who pretend to be scary. Page after page revealed a life Evelyn had lived in, parallel to his own visits. Meals, afternoons spent listening rather than fixing. Near the end, the handwriting changed, slower, more deliberate. "Rowan, if you're reading this, I didn't mean to leave you with questions. I just needed to leave you with faith." His breath caught. "They don't need saving. They need steadiness. I couldn't give them everything, but I could give them consistency. And I knew one day you could give them the rest." Rowan closed the notebook, pressing it to his chest. A soft knock. Ivy stood in the doorway holding a drawing. "Sloane said we could find you here." Rowan smiled faintly. "You found the right room." Nova peeked in. "It smells like her." "Yes," he said. "It does." Ivy looked around. "She trusted you." Rowan nodded. "I'm trying to learn how to deserve that." Nova placed the drawing on the desk, 3 figures under a tree. "That's us," she said. "So you don't forget." Rowan didn't trust himself to speak. Some promises were made without words. The first call came before sunset, then another. Rowan ignored them until Sloane appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, expression carefully neutral. "The press noticed the girls," she said. "They're asking who they are." Rowan didn't look up from Ivy and Nova, who were building a careful tower of blocks on the rug. "They're asking why," Sloane added. Rowan stood. "Then we won't answer yet. But rumors can wait." That night, a headline appeared online. Speculation dressed up as curiosity. A rival's name hovered in the background, quiet but unmistakable. Rowan turned off the screen. He sat on the floor with the girls instead. Nova leaned back against him. "You're warm." Ivy stacked the final block and smiled when it held. Later, Dr. Serena Cho arrived, introduced simply as a friend who helped families talk. She spoke at eye level, asked permission before every question. "You're doing very well," she told Ivy and Nova, "and so is Rowan." Rowan felt the word family settle in without resistance. As the evening wound down, Rowan's phone buzzed again this time, with a message from a social services liaison, polite and procedural. A routine visit, just to check in. Rowan exhaled. Not fear, responsibility. He tucked Ivy and Nova into bed, reading one of Evelyn's stories aloud. Nova fell asleep halfway through. Ivy listened to the last sentence. "Will people try to take us away?" Ivy asked quietly. Rowan met her gaze. "No one will decide anything without listening to you." She considered this, then nodded. "That's fair," she said. As Rowan turned out the light, the house felt larger and steadier than it ever had. Outside, the city hummed with questions. Inside, answers were growing slowly, carefully, and exactly as they should. The knock came at 10 in the morning. Not loud, not demanding, just firm enough to announce responsibility. Rowan opened the door himself. The woman on the porch introduced herself calmly, credentials visible but unobtrusive. "I'm here for a routine welfare check," she said. "No urgency, just a conversation." Rowan nodded. "Of course. Please come in." Inside, Ivy and Nova sat at the dining table, crayons spread like constellations. Sloane hovered nearby, careful not to hover too closely. Dr. Serena Cho was already present, seated where the children could see her clearly. Nothing was hidden. Nothing was staged. The social worker knelt to greet the girls. "Hello, Ivy." "Hello, Nova. I'm glad to meet you." Nova waved with both hands. Ivy offered a polite nod. They talked about school plans, favorite colors, the garden trees. Questions were simple, respectful. The children answered freely, sometimes glancing at Rowan not for permission, but reassurance. Rowan stayed quiet. He understood now this was not a test to pass. It was a trust to earn. In the study, paperwork was reviewed. Guardianship arrangements discussed in plain language. Rowan spoke carefully, never overpromising. "I'm committed to their well-being," he said, "and to following the process." The social worker smiled. "That matters more than anything else." When the visit ended, Ivy walked the woman to the door. "Thank you for being gentle," she said. Rowan closed the door slowly. Sloane exhaled. "That went well." "Yes," Rowan said, "but it won't stop the noise." As if summoned by his words, his phone buzzed. Messages stacked up. A rival's name surfaced again, an interview hinting at impropriety without evidence. Rowan turned the phone face down. He went to the garden instead. Ivy and Nova were crouched near the trees, whispering secrets to the leaves. Rowan joined them on the grass. "What are you telling them?" he asked. Nova grinned. "To be quiet," Ivy added, "so they don't repeat things they don't understand." Rowan smiled. The world beyond the gates was getting louder. Inside, he knew what he had to do. Soon he would speak, not to defend himself, but to protect them. That night, Rowan did not sleep. He sat at Evelyn's desk, the leather notebook open, the city lights reflected in the window like distant stars. Sloane joined him with 2 cups of tea. "They won't stop asking," she said quietly. "If you stay silent, others will fill the space." Rowan nodded. "Then I won't let them." He reread Evelyn's words, not for comfort, but for direction. They need steadiness. By morning, the decision had settled. Rowan called his communications team not to polish, not to spin, but to arrange a single press conference. One statement, one truth. No photos of the children, he said firmly. No names beyond what's already public. No questions about their past. The team hesitated. Rowan held their gaze. "This isn't negotiable." In the hours before the conference, Rowan sat with Ivy and Nova. "I'm going to talk to some people," he said. "They'll listen." "About us?" Nova asked. "About me," Rowan replied, "and about Evelyn." Ivy considered this. "Will it make things safer?" "That's the idea." Ivy nodded. "Then you should tell the truth, slowly." Rowan smiled. "I plan to." At the venue, cameras lined the room. Microphones waited. Rowan stepped to the podium alone. "I lost my wife," he began, "and on the day of her funeral, I discovered a part of her life that humbled me." He spoke of kindness done quietly, of children cared for consistently, of trust passed forward. "These girls are not a story," he said clearly. "They are people. They are protected. And any decisions about their future will be made with care, lawfully, and with their voices heard." Questions came. Rowan answered some, declined others. When it ended, the room felt different, not triumphant, resolved. Back home, Ivy watched the replay silently. Nova sat in Rowan's lap. "You didn't sound scary," Nova said. "That's good," Rowan replied. Outside, the headlines softened. Support replaced suspicion. The storm had not vanished, but it had changed direction. The call came 2 days later. Lena Ortega's voice was calm, precise. "I have information," she said, "and it's sensitive." Rowan closed the door to the study. "I'm listening. The girls' biological parents are alive," Lena said. "They've been in recovery for over a year. They're stable, and they've been looking for them." Rowan sat down slowly. "Do they know where the girls are?" he asked. "No," Lena replied. "Only that they're safe." Rowan thanked her and ended the call. He stayed seated for a long moment, hands folded, breathing steady. This was not a threat. This was a responsibility larger than his own grief. That evening, Rowan invited Dr. Serena Cho back. "We need a plan," he said. "One that moves at the girls' pace." Dr. Cho nodded. "Then we start with honesty. Gentle, partial, supported." Rowan gathered Ivy and Nova in the living room. He sat on the floor with them. "There's something important," he said, "and we can stop anytime you want." Ivy listened carefully. Nova held his sleeve. "Your parents," Rowan continued, "are alive. They went through a very hard time. They're better now, and one day they might want to meet you." Silence settled. Nova blinked. "Like a hello?" "Yes," Rowan said. "Only if you're ready." Ivy asked the harder question. "Does that change where we are?" Rowan shook his head. "No one disappears." Dr. Cho smiled gently. "You get to go slowly." Ivy leaned back against Rowan. Nova curled closer. "Okay," Ivy said after a moment. "Slow is good." That night, Rowan stood at the window watching the lights beyond the estate. The story was not ending. It was widening. And for the first time, Rowan felt ready to carry it carefully, honestly, and together. The park was chosen for its quiet. Not hidden, not remote, just ordinary enough to feel safe. Tall trees lined the walking paths, their leaves moving gently in the afternoon breeze. Children laughed somewhere near the swings, a normal sound that mattered more than any security detail. Rowan arrived early. He laid a blanket on the grass and sat with Ivy and Nova between him. Dr. Serena Cho stood a short distance away, close enough to help, far enough to give space. There were no cameras, no reporters, only people who had agreed to move slowly. "Remember," Rowan said softly, "you don't owe anyone anything today." Nova nodded, gripping his hand. Ivy took a breath and looked around. "They said hello is enough," she said. Rowan smiled. "Hello is perfect." Marisol and Dylan approached from the path. They stopped several steps away as instructed. Marisol's hands trembled slightly at her sides. Dylan kept his voice steady, though his eyes were wet. They did not rush. They did not kneel dramatically or reach out without permission. "Hello," Marisol said quietly. Nova peeked out from behind Rowan's arm. "Hello," she replied. Ivy watched closely, studying faces, tone, posture, the way a child learns whether the world is safe. "You can sit," Rowan said, gesturing to the edge of the blanket. They did. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Nova held up a blue crayon. "Aunt Evelyn liked this color," she said. Marisol nodded. "She told me you loved the sky." Nova considered that. "I do." Ivy shifted closer to Rowan. "Why now?" she asked, not accusing, just direct. Dylan answered carefully. "Because we're ready to be honest. And because we know we missed time we can't get back." Ivy absorbed this silently. Rowan felt the weight of the moment pressing against his ribs. He wanted to intervene, to protect. But protection, he was learning, sometimes meant allowing safe truth to exist. Dr. Cho spoke gently. "We can take breaks. We can change topics." Ivy shook her head. "I want to know." Marisol met her gaze. "We didn't leave because of you. We left because we didn't know how to be okay. That was wrong. We worked to fix it." Nova leaned into Rowan. "Are you okay now?" Marisol smiled sadly. "We are learning." The afternoon passed in fragments, short answers, long silences, careful smiles. Nova eventually crawled closer, showing a drawing. Ivy stayed where she was, watching, thinking. As the sun lowered, Rowan stood. "That's enough for today," he said calmly. No one argued. As they parted, Ivy surprised everyone by speaking again. "Next time," she said, "we can bring snacks." Marisol nodded, tears in her eyes. "I'd like that." Rowan walked away, holding both girls' hands. Behind them, two adults watched with gratitude and restraint. No promises were made, but something fragile and hopeful had begun. That night, the house was quiet again. Ivy sat on the edge of the bed, legs tucked neatly beneath her. Nova lay beside her, tracing patterns on the blanket with one finger. Rowan sat in the chair near the window, listening. They had not spoken since the park. Ivy broke the silence. "If they get better," she said slowly, "do we have to leave?" Rowan felt the question land like a held breath. "No," he said immediately. "No one is being moved. No one is being replaced." Ivy searched his face. "Adults say things change." "They do," Rowan admitted. "But they don't disappear." Nova rolled onto her side. "You won't disappear." Rowan moved closer and rested his forearm on the bed. "I'm here." Dr. Serena Cho had prepared him for this moment. Children did not fear complexity. They feared uncertainty. Ivy nodded once. "Okay." She turned to Nova. "We can go slow." Nova yawned. Slow is good. In the days that followed, routines settled. Short visits, always supervised, always planned. Rowan attended each one not as a gatekeeper but as a constant. Ivy observed more than she spoke. Nova laughed easily, then returned to Rowan's side when she felt full. One afternoon, Ivy surprised everyone. She handed Marisol a piece of paper. "You can draw with us," she said, "but only nice things." Marisol smiled through tears. "I can do that." Rowan watched from the bench, chest tight, with something that felt like pride and grief braided together. Later, Rowan met privately with Dr. Cho. "They're adjusting well," she said. "Because you're not rushing them." Rowan nodded. "I don't want to win anything." "That's why this is working," Dr. Cho replied. That night, Rowan sat alone in Evelyn's study. The notebook lay open. "Families don't need perfection," Evelyn had written. "They need patience." Rowan closed the book. He felt it then, the quiet fear he had been ignoring, the headaches, the moments of dizziness he blamed on stress. He pressed his fingers to his temple, breathed through it. He did not tell anyone. Not yet. Down the hall, Ivy tucked Nova in with careful hands. "You did good today," Ivy whispered. Nova smiled sleepily. So did Uncle Rowan. Ivy looked toward the door. "Yes," she agreed. "He did." In the dark, Rowan stood still. He understood now. Love did not mean holding on tightly. It meant standing where you were needed and staying. The diagnosis came quietly. No dramatic pause, no long speech, just a doctor's office, a screen, and words spoken carefully. Rowan Dr. Nolan Pierce said we found something. Rowan listened without interrupting. A tumor. Treatable. Serious. Time-sensitive. Rowan nodded once. What's the plan? As he drove home, the city blurred past the windshield. His hands were steady, his breathing even. He did not feel fear, he felt urgency. At home, Ivy and Nova ran to greet him, voices bright. Uncle Rowan, we learned a new song. Nova pulled his hand. Ivy smiled, proud and expectant. Rowan knelt and opened his arms. Show me. That night after they slept, Rowan sat at his desk with legal documents spread before him. Trusts, guardianship contingencies, foundation bylaws. He worked until dawn, not because he was afraid of dying, but because he was committed to living responsibly. In the weeks that followed, treatment began quietly. Appointments scheduled when the girls were at school or visiting Marisol and Dylan. Sloane noticed the fatigue but said nothing. Rowan showed up anyway. At the park, at the table, at bedtime. One evening, Ivy studied him closely. You're tired in a different way, she said. Rowan considered lying, then chose truth, gentle and safe. I'm getting help, he said, and I have people taking care of me. Ivy nodded. Okay. Nova hugged him tightly. We can be brave together. Rowan closed his eyes. That night alone in the garden, Rowan looked up at the stars. He thought of Evelyn, of the life she had lived quietly, intentionally, of the trust she had placed in him. I'm trying, he whispered. Inside the house, 2 small lights glowed beneath bedroom doors. Rowan did not know what the future held, but he knew this, no matter what happened, Ivy and Nova would not be alone, and neither for the first time in his life was he. Rowan learned how to live 2 lives. One life was bright and ordinary: breakfast bowls, crayons, soft laughter echoing down hallways that used to sound like marble and emptiness. Ivy's careful voice explaining the rules of a board game. Nova's delighted squeal when she discovered the hidden drawer in the kitchen that held cookies. The other life was quiet and scheduled. It lived inside calendar blocks labeled with harmless names: meeting, review site, visit. It lived inside corridors that smelled like disinfectant and patience, where nurses spoke in warm tones, and every chair in the waiting room faced the same kind of uncertainty. He never let the second life touch the first. Not because he wanted to deceive them, but because he wanted their days to remain safe, predictable, steady. Treatment made him tired in a way success never had. It wasn't the exhaustion of late-night deals or long flights. It was deeper, as if his bones were carrying something heavy on behalf of the rest of him. Sloane noticed. She didn't accuse. She simply started doing more. She ordered meals that felt homey instead of formal. She canceled unnecessary appointments without asking. She asked the staff to keep the house quieter when Rowan came home, as if sound itself could bruise him. Rowan pretended not to see her kindness. In the afternoons, he showed up for the visits at the park. Always. Marisol and Dylan kept their posture gentle, no sudden requests, no dramatic pleas. They sat on the edge of the blanket, answering questions slowly, allowing Ivy to lead and Nova to interrupt with curiosity. Dr. Serena Cho watched it all like a conductor, guiding without controlling. Rowan sat nearby, a fixed point the girls could return to whenever their feelings became too big for small bodies. Ivy asked carefully chosen questions. What did Aunt Evelyn like about us? She asked one Saturday, turning a crayon between her fingers. Marisol's eyes shimmered. She said you were brave in quiet ways. And Nova, Ivy asked. Dylan smiled softly. She said Nova could turn sadness into a story. Nova blinked. Like magic, like kindness, Rowan corrected gently. Nova's lips curved. I like that better. As the weeks passed, something changed in Rowan's face. Not dramatically, just enough that Ivy noticed. Ivy noticed everything. One night, Rowan read one of Evelyn's notebook stories aloud. It was about two small stars who refused to dim even when the sky felt too large. Nova fell asleep halfway through, thumb tucked near her cheek. Ivy stayed awake. When Rowan closed the notebook, Ivy spoke in a whisper. "You don't laugh as much," she said. Rowan's throat tightened. "I'm tired sometimes." Ivy studied him with the solemn precision of a child who has learned to read adults. "You can tell the truth slowly," she said, repeating his own words back to him. "We can handle slow." Rowan felt a sting behind his eyes. He leaned closer, keeping his voice calm. "I'm getting help," he said, "and I'm not alone." Ivy nodded, accepting what she could without demanding what she couldn't. She reached out and placed her small hand on his wrist, steady, warm grounding. "Okay," she whispered. "Just don't be alone in your head." Rowan inhaled, careful and controlled. Then he did something he'd never done in any boardroom or negotiation. He admitted quietly, "I'm trying." The next morning, Rowan stood in Evelyn's study and opened the notebook again. He turned to the last page and read her words like a vow. They don't need saving. They need steadiness. Rowan closed the book and looked out the window at the garden where Ivy and Nova were chasing each other in circles, their laughter threading through the cold air like a bright ribbon. He didn't know what his body would do, but he knew what his heart would. He would keep showing up. Rowan waited for the right day, not the perfect one. A perfect day didn't exist anymore. There were only days that held enough calm to carry difficult words without crushing them. He chose a Sunday afternoon when the sky was pale and soft, when the house smelled like tea and cinnamon, when Ivy and Nova were building a paper castle on the rug tape everywhere, crooked towers glitter on their sleeves. Dr. Serena Cho sat in an armchair by the fireplace, present without looming. Sloane stood near the window, arms folded tightly, as if bracing for impact. Marisol and Dylan sat on the couch with careful posture, hands resting in their laps. Rowan sat on the floor, not above anyone, not behind a desk, not protected by titles. He cleared his throat, then spoke slowly. "Thank you for coming," he began. "I want to share something important, and I want us to do it gently." Nova looked up first. "Is it about the kite?" she asked, remembering the promise of a future picnic. Rowan smiled faintly. "Not the kite." Ivy's eyes sharpened. She sensed it. She always did. Rowan inhaled. "A little while ago, I found out I'm sick." The room shifted. Sloane's hand went to her mouth. Marisol's breath caught. Dylan reached for her fingers. Ivy stayed still. Nova blinked, confused but listening. Rowan continued, keeping his voice calm and safe. "It's something in my head that the doctors are treating. I'm getting care. I have a plan." Nova crawled closer, scooting across the rug until she could touch his knee. "Will you be okay?" Rowan chose truth that didn't frighten. "The doctors are working very hard to help me get better, and I'm going to do everything they ask." Ivy's voice was small but steady. "Is it why you're tired?" Rowan nodded. "Yes." Ivy swallowed. "Will you have to leave?" Rowan's chest tightened. Dr. Cho's eyes met his steady support. "No," Rowan said firmly. "Not right now. And I'm not making any decisions alone. We're going to take this one day at a time." Nova suddenly wrapped her arms around his neck. "I don't want you to be sad alone," she whispered, echoing the thing she'd said at the funeral without realizing the echo. Rowan closed his eyes. He felt the warmth of her small body, the soft weight of her trust. Sloane stepped forward and knelt beside them. Her composure cracked into tenderness. "You should have told me," she said softly, not angry, just aching. Rowan looked at her. "I didn't want the house to feel afraid." Sloane shook her head. "We can feel things and still be safe." Marisol spoke next, voice trembling but sincere. "Rowan, you've cared for our girls with such steadiness. If you'll let us, we want to support you too. Not out of guilt, out of gratitude." Dylan nodded. "Whatever you need." time, help, structure. Rowan's throat tightened. He had spent his life believing help came with hidden strings, but their faces held no demands, only willingness. Dr. Cho leaned forward slightly. "Ivy Nova," she said gently. "You can ask anything, or you can just feel. Both are okay." Ivy's eyes glistened. She crawled into Rowan's lap with slow, careful movement, as if she didn't want to break him. Then she said the simplest thing. "I'll help," she whispered. "Like Aunt Evelyn helped us." Rowan's breath shuddered. He placed one hand on Ivy's back, the other on Nova's shoulder, holding them with the careful tenderness of someone learning a new language. Sloane rested a hand on Rowan's arm. Marisol and Dylan moved closer, forming a circle that felt less like a meeting and more like a shelter. The paper castle lay forgotten on the rug, half-built, glittering in the firelight, imperfect and beautiful. Rowan looked around at them. This was not the life he planned. This was the life Evelyn had quietly guided him toward, a family not made by blood alone, but by chosen steadiness. Hope arrived the way winter sun did, soft, cautious, almost unbelievable. It started with small changes. Sloane reorganized Rowan's schedule without apology. "Your health is the priority," she said, daring anyone, board members, executives, the invisible pressure of expectation, to argue. Rowan didn't. He let her. Marisol and Dylan adjusted their work hours to help with the girls' routines. Not as a dramatic gesture, but as a steady one, showing up early, bringing lunch ingredients, offering to read bedtime stories when Rowan needed rest. Ivy and Nova adapted in their own quiet ways. Nova became a collector of good moments. She started a jar in the kitchen, dropping folded notes inside. Uncle Rowan smiled today. Ivy laughed at my joke. Mom drew a silly dragon. Ivy became a guardian of calm. She reminded adults to speak slowly when voices rose. She made lists, tiny, crooked lists, in her child handwriting tea blanket story. Rowan watched them astonished by how children could carry love without weight. Meanwhile, the Evelyn Ashford Foundation began taking shape. Rowan refused to make it grand. He wanted it practical support for families, rebuilding resources for safe reunification programs, guided by professionals like Dr. Cho, a legacy that didn't require speeches to exist. One afternoon, Rowan sat in Evelyn's study with Lena Ortega on speakerphone. "I've identified families who could benefit from the Foundation's support," Lena said. "They need counseling access, stability planning, supervised reconnection options." Rowan closed his eyes. "Start with the ones who have consistent caregivers," he said. "The ones who just need a bridge." After he hung up, Nova wandered in holding the leather notebook. "I found Aunt Evelyn's stories," she said proudly, as if she'd discovered treasure. Rowan smiled. "She wrote those for you." Nova hugged the notebook to her chest. "Can I keep it?" Rowan paused, then nodded. "You can keep it in your room, and we'll read from it together." Nova beamed and ran down the hall. Ivy lingered in the doorway. "You're doing what she wanted," she said quietly. Rowan's voice softened. "I'm trying." 2 weeks later, Dr. Nolan Pierce called. "Rowan," he said, "I want you to come in for new scans." Rowan's stomach tightened. New scans were never casual. They were punctuation marks in a sentence no one could fully read. That morning at the hospital, Ivy and Nova insisted on waiting nearby with Sloane, Marisol, and Dylan. They brought coloring books and a small bag of snacks. Dr. Cho sat with them, ensuring everything stayed calm and age-appropriate. Nova drew a kite. Ivy drew a tree. Rowan watched from across the waiting area, his heart full and heavy at once. Hours passed. Then Dr. Pierce appeared with a careful smile. Rowan stood. "I have good news," Dr. Pierce said. "The tumor is responding better than we expected. It's shrinking." For a moment, Rowan didn't move. He felt the words arrive slowly, like light entering a room. Sloane exhaled a sound that was almost a laugh, almost a sob. Marisol clasped her hands together. Dylan squeezed her shoulder. Nova ran to Rowan and hugged his waist. That means the doctors are winning, right? Rowan knelt and held her gently. It means we're making progress. Ivy stepped closer, eyes shining with relief. She tried to keep quiet. So, we keep going slow, she said. Rowan nodded. Yes. Back at home, they didn't throw a party. They made dinner together. Sloane supervised a simple meal. Marisol and Dylan helped the girls stir batter for cookies. Rowan sat at the table, tired but present, watching flour dust Nova's nose and Ivy's serious concentration as she measured ingredients. When the cookies came out warm, Nova placed one on a napkin and carried it to Rowan like it was sacred. For you're brave, she said. Rowan laughed, truly laughed, for the first time in weeks. Later that night, Rowan stood in the garden beneath the cold, clear sky. He didn't make big promises. He simply whispered to the air, to Evelyn, to the quiet that held her memory. Thank you. Inside the house, the jar on the kitchen counter gained a new note written in Nova's wobbly letters. Today, hope got bigger. Time did not rush them anymore. Spring arrived without announcement, softening the edges of everything it touched. The garden filled with new green, and the house learned a different rhythm, lighter, steadier, alive. Rowan's treatments continued quieter now. Not secret, just no longer frightening. He rested when needed. He worked when he could. And every day he showed up for what mattered. Ivy and Nova grew into the days. Nova's jar of good moments filled quickly. Notes fluttered inside like small flags of hope. Uncle Rowan laughed at breakfast. Mom stayed for dinner. We flew the kite again. Ivy took responsibility for checking the calendar, reminding everyone when visits were scheduled, when rest was needed, when it was simply time to sit together and be quiet. Marisol and Dylan became familiar presences, not visitors, not replacements, but partners in care. They followed the pace set by the girls, never pushing past comfort. The Evelyn Ashford Foundation opened its first programs. No ceremony, no press. Just families receiving counseling guidance and time, the things that had mattered most here. One afternoon, Rowan watched Ivy and Nova draw with Marisol at the long kitchen table. Dylan stood nearby, carefully assembling a puzzle Nova had abandoned halfway through. Rowan felt something settle inside him. Not relief, belonging. He realized then that healing wasn't a finish line. It was a practice, a series of ordinary days made extraordinary by how gently they were held. That night, Rowan wrote a single sentence on a small card and placed it inside Nova's jar. Today, we were together. The doctor used the word carefully. Remission. Rowan heard it as if through water, clear but distant, until Ivy squeezed his hand. That's a good word, right? She asked. Dr. Pierce smiled. It's a very good word. Nova bounced once in her chair. Does that mean we celebrate? Rowan laughed softly. I think it means we breathe. They didn't celebrate with balloons or speeches. They went home. That evening, the kitchen filled with warmth. Sloane prepared a simple dinner. Marisol and Dylan helped the girls set the table. Ivy folded napkins with precision. Nova insisted on placing a cookie at each seat just in case. Rowan raised a glass of juice. To this family, he said quietly, for choosing patience. To Evelyn, Sloane added her voice steady. The girls lifted their cups too. To slow days, Ivy said. To brave people, Nova added. After dinner, they sat together in the living room. Rowan read from Evelyn's notebook the story of two stars who learned they didn't have to shine alone. Nova fell asleep before the ending. Ivy listened until the last word. When Rowan closed the book, Ivy leaned against him. She'd like this, she said. Rowan nodded. I think she planned it. Outside, the night was calm. Inside, hope rested easily, no longer fragile, no longer borrowed. Just real. Autumn returned them to the park. The same trees, the same open sky. This time there was laughter before hesitation. Dylan held the kite while Marisol untangled the string. Ivy checked the wind with thoughtful seriousness. Nova danced in place, impatient with joy. Rowan stood beside them, hands open, heart full. "Ready?" he asked. The kite rose smoothly, catching the air as if it had always known where to go. Nova squealed. Ivy smiled wide and unguarded. They all held the string together. No one led. No one let go. Rowan felt the sun on his face and thought of how close he'd come to missing this, how quietly life had offered him something better than control. Marisol met his gaze. "You'll always be part of us," she said. "Not a question. A truth." Rowan nodded. "Always." The kite soared higher, steady against the blue. Ivy looked up. "Families don't have to match," she said thoughtfully. Nova laughed. "They just have to stay." Rowan smiled, tightening his grip on the string, not to claim it, but to share it. As the wind carried the kite across the sky, Rowan felt a peace he hadn't known he was allowed to have. Evelyn's legacy wasn't a foundation. It was this: a circle of people choosing gentleness, a future built slowly, a love that stayed. And for the first time, Rowan Ashford knew he was exactly where he belonged. Did this story leave a lasting impression on you? We'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment, rate it from 1 to 10, and tap the end screen to see another heartwarming story waiting for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, then tap the bell icon so you don't miss any new stories. Until our next story.